There's something I want to challenge today. And honestly, if this lands for you, it may completely change the way you see yourself. Because a lot of people walking around right now think they have a discipline problem. They think, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. And because they're not doing it, they assume something must be wrong with them. So they try harder. They search for motivation. They watch productivity videos. They make new plans, new routines, new promises to themselves. This time I'm serious. This week will be different. Tomorrow I'm going to lock in. But then tomorrow comes and somehow they still don't take the step. And eventually that starts turning into self-judgment. I'm lazy. I lack discipline. I never follow through. Why can't I just do the thing I know I need to do? But what if the issue isn't discipline at all? What if the real issue is that something inside of you is trying to communicate, and instead of listening to it, you keep trying to overpower it? Because hesitation is not always weakness. Sometimes hesitation is information, and that changes everything. The misunderstanding around motivation. One of the biggest misunderstandings in the modern self-help culture is the idea that if you're not taking action, you simply need more motivation. But motivation is temporary, and honestly, most people already know what they need to do. That's not the problem. The problem is what comes up emotionally when they think about doing it. That's the part people avoid. For example, someone says they want to start a business, but underneath that desire is fear. What if nobody cares? What if I fail publicly? What if I put my heart into this and it goes nowhere? Another person says they want to be healthy, but underneath that is another fear. What if I try again and disappoint myself again? Another person wants to leave a toxic environment, but underneath there is uncertainty. What happens if I leave and everything becomes unstable? See, the surface problem is rarely the real problem. And until you understand the emotional resistance underneath the action, you'll keep trying to solve the wrong issue. Why people keep circling the same starting line? This is something I've noticed in so many people lately. They aren't necessarily confused. They're overwhelmed internally. Part of them wants to move forward. Another part feels unsafe doing so. And instead of recognizing the conflict, they label themselves as inconsistent. But inconsistency is often unresolved internal tension. One part says go, another part says wait. And because both voices are active at the same time, you end up frozen in place. Not because you're incapable, but because you're internally divided. And most people never slow down long enough to notice this. They just keep forcing themselves harder. But forcing yourself against yourself rarely creates peace. It usually creates burnout. The hidden fear of change. Now here's something deeper. Sometimes the reason people don't move forward is because moving forward would force them to become someone new. And that can feel terrifying because even if your current life is uncomfortable, it's familiar. And familiarity feels safe to the nervous system, even when it hurts. So when people say, I want change, what they often mean is, I want the benefits of change without the discomfort of transformation. But real movement requires something from us. It asks us to release an old identity, the old coping patterns, the old excuses, the old emotional protections. And sometimes the hesitation you feel is grief. Grief over the version of yourself that cannot come with you in the next chapter. That's deeper than laziness. That's human. The pressure of things that matter. Another thing people rarely talk about is this. The things that matter most to us often create the strongest avoidance patterns. Why? Because importance creates emotional weight. If something deeply matters to you, then failure suddenly feels more personal. Rejection feels more personal. Risk feels more personal. So ironically, people often procrastinate most around the things they care most about. Not because they don't care, but because they care so deeply. And this is why somebody can work hard all day and yet avoid the one thing that actually matters to their soul. Not because they're lazy, but because the emotional stakes feel enormous. The trap of self-attack. Now here's where things become dangerous. When people don't understand this dynamic, they begin attacking themselves, and self-attack drains energy. You start every day already emotionally exhausted because your internal dialogue sounds like this. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just do this? I'm wasting my life. I should be further along. And the more shame you pile onto yourself, the harder movement becomes. Because shame rarely creates sustainable action. Safety does. Understanding does. Compassion does. Clarity does. This doesn't mean avoiding responsibility. It means approaching yourself honestly instead of violently. There's a difference. A different question. So instead of asking, how do I force myself to do this? Try asking, what feels unsafe about this step? Or what emotion am I trying not to feel? That question changes the entire conversation. Because now you're no longer fighting yourself, you're listening to yourself. Your listening creates awareness. Awareness creates clarity, and clarity creates movement. Not frantic movement, not panic-driven movement, grounded movement. One practical exercise. So here's something simple I want you to try after this episode. Take the thing you keep avoiding, the email, the conversation, the application, the creative project, the health decision, whatever it is, and ask yourself honestly, if I actually did this, what feels uncomfortable about it? Then stop. Don't fix it. Don't judge the answer. Just let the answer exist. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's uncertainty. Maybe it's vulnerability. Maybe it's pressure. But naming it matters. Because what stays unconscious controls us. What becomes conscious can finally be worked with. And sometimes the biggest shift in your life begins with a simple honesty. You don't need to become a machine. You don't need to bully yourself into action. And you don't need to spend your life believing you're broken because you hesitate. Sometimes hesitation is wisdom. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's an emotional signal asking for it to be acknowledged before you move forward. But whatever it is, you cannot heal what you refuse to look at. And maybe the next step in your life isn't more pressure. Maybe it's deeper honesty. Because once you truly understand what's underneath the avoidance, you stop circling the same starting line. And you finally begin moving with yourself instead of against yourself. If this episode resonated with you, the deeper Vibe Shift conversation continues at the Vibe Shift blog. The link is in the show notes. And if this brought something up for you personally, I'd love to hear from you. You can visit my Facebook Vibe Shift official page. You're not alone in this, and you're probably not as stuck as you think you are.